In doing my homework for this introduction, I sort of polled a number of current and former Marines, and as well as other Marine Corps watchers, about General Conway. And these are the kinds of observations that I got from people. A man of tremendous integrity, a straight shooter, not only on the battlefield but also here in D.C., a true leader. This is a person who is almost universally admired and respected, which is a very rare credential in Washington, D.C. So please join me in welcoming General Conway.
Folks, the organizers have asked me to talk about lessons learned coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and then more importantly, I think, post-Iraq and Afghanistan in the instance of the United States Marine Corps, and I'm happy again to be able to do that. But I think to be able to look to the future, you first have to understand a little bit about the past and the present, so I'll spend a few moments there before talking about what we see on downrange. First of all, I think it's apparent to us that we're truly in a long war. I think if you accept that Iraq and Afghanistan are the first battles in this long war, that we're in a generational struggle with extremists that are going to take some time to overcome. Turning to Marines in particular in Iraq and Afghanistan, we currently have about 26,000 Marines in Iraq, something less than about 400 in Afghanistan. If you're not aware, we have observed a 7-month deployment policy with our maneuver forces, a 1-year policy where it relates to the headquarters and the group, the division, the MEF headquarters that are assigned. That gives us some continuity, once again, with the populations that we deal with. It has been criticized, it's been questioned, but frankly, we very much like 7 months. It's very close to our culture. It is much more acceptable with our families, and we've grown to that routine and found it, I think, effective and efficient over time. The Al-Anbar province is encouraging at this point in time. We saw a transition start to take place just about this time last year, just about October of last year. The sheikhs initially out west came to our commanders and said, you know, we really have had it up to here with the Al-Qaeda. They have a murder and intimidation campaign that is very hurtful to our people. They're killing our children almost wantonly. They now want to intermarry with our women. And if you will join with us, we will slaughter them, their terms. That pact was agreed upon rapidly, as you might expect, and we have seen that process at work now for the better part of a year. And the transformation that's come over the province is really quite stark. Also, the Osprey has arrived in theater as of last week, first operational deployment for that aircraft. You know and I know it's had a fairly checkered past up to this point, but we have gotten it ready over recent months to be prepared to go into its first combat deployment, and it's there now. They're in the process of doing left side, right side with the squadron they're replacing, and we think it's going to revolutionize the way that we do our helicopter-borne tactics. I was talking with Michelle and the good secretary before we stepped up here. As an anecdote of capability, in 2003, I spoke to my boss then, Lieutenant General Dave McKiernan, and said, you know, we were about to cross the line of departure, and I said, keep this in your hip pocket. If you need it any time over the next weeks or months, I can dismount 1,000 Marines from our armored vehicles, put them into helicopters, and have them any place you want them to be on the battlefield within 100 miles in about 12 hours, and that includes planning. Ladies and gentlemen, I can make that same claim today, except the distance is now 300 miles, based on the capability of Osprey. We've looked, ladies and gentlemen, at the advisability of creating a professional advisor corps. If you look at where a lot of our young majors and captains, lieutenant colonels are today, they're not in the headquarters stateside. They're over somewhere in Kabul or up in the mountains in Tora Bora or out on the border on Syria, advising host nation military, host nation security forces. If that is to be our future, and I think in large measure it is likely to be, do we need to professionalize that capability with regard to training, organization, record book tracking, all those manner of things? I would tell you that I'm a little bit concerned about us keeping our expeditionary flavor. Quite frankly, if you compared today what the battalion training and equipment set is that we put into battalions when we first went into Iraq, it's vastly different from what we're using today. We are much heavier than ever before. We're talking about a potential buy of 3,700 MRAPs. Those vehicles weigh 40,000 pounds each in the larger category. Frankly, you can't put them in a helicopter, and you can't even put them aboard ship. So we've simply gotten heavier. We've become, in some ways, a second land army. And it's okay for now. I mean, there's no second guessing whether or not MRAP is the right thing to do. I still see it as a moral imperative to protect those great troops that we were talking about earlier. But can I give a satisfactory answer to what we're going to be doing with those things in 5 or 10 years? Probably not. Wrap them in, shrink wrap and put them on asphalt somewhere is about the best thing that, we can describe at this point. And as expensive as they are, that is probably not a good use of the taxpayers' money. So we're concerned about staying expeditionary, lightening our requirements again, maybe getting back to where we were. But it is a conundrum. We think our doctrine is about right. We've gotten some new doctrine in to supplement, in some ways supplant, the old Small Wars Manual. Our maneuver warfare doctrine is sound. It's a mindset as much as it is a means of employment, and we're pretty comfortable with that. That said, we are coming out with a relatively new maritime strategy that will be announced this week at the Naval War College up in Newport. The CNO and I and the Commandant of the Coast Guard are going to go up, and the three of us talk about what this new strategy means. Not terribly different from what you have perhaps been accustomed to. But it is good, I think, that the Coast Guard is now engaged. It is good that we hang on to certain tenets that are always going to be, I think, prominent with U.S. naval forces. But there's some other things that we think we can and should be doing. And that's probably all I need to say about it at this point, unless I upstage my two counterparts. There is also out there, I think, sort of a new dimension in terms of combatant commands that we're extremely interested in. It's called AFRICOM. If you haven't heard about it, the thought process is that we will establish a new combatant command that has exclusive responsibility for Africa. Previously, European Command has had that role, and it's in the process of being built right now. We're excited about it because although we see the day when we go back to the Pacific, we also see a role, an expeditionary role in Africa. To get around in Africa, you don't go from capital to capital. You go from capital to Europe and then back to another capital. That's how you get from place to place in Africa. It's also huge in terms of a continent. If you simply overlay a map of the United States, you start to get a feel as to how huge Africa really is. But we think that small numbers of Marines in the back of an Osprey have a place in the future of AFRICOM. We've contributed to the initial stand-up of the headquarters. We sought for and lost the deputy's billet, so we now have the J3 assigned, which is also, I think, a key billet. We are suffering some sticker shock from the initial laydown of what they tell us it's going to be in terms of the stand-up, but we'll negotiate that and see where we go from there. The interesting part about AFRICOM, though, is that it's intended to be about half military and about half interagency. Frankly, at this point, we do not have the interagency contributions that we would like to see because I think a lot of what will need to be done in Africa doesn't have a military flavor to it. It's much more involving people from State Department or Justice or Agriculture or Border Enforcement, those kinds of people that can do some great advisory work. Right now, we're at something less than 4% of the gross national product. If you look at what previous wars have been, it was something over 9% for Vietnam, over 13% for Korea, almost 39% for World War II. And yet we're engaged. It's expensive, I'll be the first to say that, but we're engaging in two different fights with less than 4%. And to think that that could go down is a little bit distracting in terms of what we need to have in the future out there to stay engaged and what at least many, and myself included, think is going to be a long fight. Let me just close by saying that we talk about equipment, we talk about our responsibility. We do it best with people. We continue to be concerned that we have the best qualified young man or woman out there that America can provide to go forward to do what has to be done. So long as we can be successful continuing to fill our ranks with those great young people that are American patriots and are willing to go fight for their country, then I think we'll be just fine, whatever else falls out. Michelle, thank you. Thank you very much for listening, folks. I appreciate it.